How do we create space as 6 sensories for 5 sensories to show up and do good things? One of the reasons why 5 sensories don't show up in the ways that we want them to and they exhibit bad behaviors, it's because as 6 sensories, we haven't taken full responsibility for our lives. We haven't set boundaries. And when we're behaving and showing up in that way, 5 sensories just do whatever they can get away with. It's like a spoiled child that eats too many cookies. If they can get away with something, they probably will. And so as 6 sensories, if we really want to have high quality relationships, we have to be responsible for whatever has happened in the past. If somebody's treated us improperly, we've screwed up, we've made a mistake, we have to fully own it. If you've been in too close communication with the 5 sensory, own it. If you initiated commitment too early and they weren't ready, own it. That's the very beginning of creating that space. When you are creating ownership for all of those events that may have happened that led to negative relationship events, what happens is that you are creating space for the next 5 sensory who shows up to potentially do something good for you. Creating space is not just about acknowledging your past. What's also necessary in order to create space is to reflect on how you're behaving in the present. Are you reaching out often? And if so, what are your messages like? Are you double texting? Are you saying you're available whenever, wherever? Are you traveling a long distance to see this 5 sensory? These sorts of things you have to keep in mind. And I'm not saying you can never give effort, you can never reciprocate, but you have to be extremely careful because as 6 sensories, we're just prone to overgiving. And that's our #1 mistake in relationships. And if you've had failed relationships in the past, and it's not really clear why you've had failed relationships because you thought you were showing up in the right ways and being a good person, it's likely because you've overgiven. It's a very easy mistake to make, and it really messes us up in relationships that it's like we think we're showing up this uber good person, the super heroine or superhero, and basically it backfires on us because we're too available and the 5 sensory takes this for granted. They're like a child that is spoiled and just runs around and does whatever they want to do, right? So we're actually responsible for that. We can demonize the 5 sensories all we want for that bad behavior, but in the end, we're the ones who didn't discipline them. We didn't set any boundaries. And I don't mean discipline like yell at them or hurt them intentionally. We can discipline them by stepping back and having self-respect and having the backbone to potentially walk away if we need to. If we have that courage, then we have the power to set boundaries. So in our current, present, everyday life, we can get too emotional in our relationships and we can be the first to show how eager and interested we are, and you can be too keen on the other person. And you also don't want to be like a dead fish and show no interest at all. So I think this is where a lot of gurus can kind of go back and forth and argue. One will say, show interest, ask for the next date. And then others will say, don't ask for the next date. Let the other person ask you. And I think the sweet spot to that advice is to be kind and reciprocate. Be enthusiastic and reward good behavior when good behavior shows up. Say thank you. I appreciate that. Watch for the good things that the other person is doing and pay attention, and you'll find more and more of them. And you can acknowledge them for anything good that they do, no matter how small that good deed is. And if you reward their good with the right level of praise, with the right level of gratitude, you say, thank you, I really appreciate that. Or maybe they buy something expensive for you and you're willing to spend a little bit of money on them back. It doesn't have to be always exactly the same amount, but you show that you're thinking about them, you care about them. Then you've got a better shot at having a balanced relationship where you're not going to accidentally overgive and mess it up. The key to giving space to a 5 sensory to show up in the right ways, and for that 5 sensory to show their emotions and say the right things like they're in love with you or you're beautiful with no makeup on or whatever it is that they say to you that makes you feel good. You want to have a bit of an air of mystery. And if you're somebody who really, really wants a relationship or really, really wants a marriage and that's your number one priority, it's going to be really hard to hide that. You genuinely, sincerely should come up with other priorities in your life other than relationships. Relationships should not be the altar that you worship. You should have a real altar where you have a real spiritual connection with the universe, you know, or go to church or go to the mosque or wherever you go for that relationship, but don't turn your personal relationships into that. It is not the same thing. And a lot of people, especially six sensories, will turn their relationships into something that's like, I'm worshiping the other person. And I've even heard that sometimes in relationship programs. It's like you have to worship the partner and put them first. And okay, like there are times where you can be selfish and screw up that way. When you are a sixth sensory, selfishness is probably not your primary problem. You're probably pretty safe to say that this is not the way you're going to show up, and you don't genuinely need to worry about it. The advice to show up with unconditional love is usually reserved more for people who are in a five sensory mode. For them, that's a good idea because they have a bad habit of threatening the relationship and threatening to leave if certain conditions aren't met, which is generally a bad idea for either five sensories or six sensories. Nobody should be threatening the relationship because that is predicting the end of the relationship. A lot of five sensories like to masquerade that they're six sensories. They pay attention, they will talk like we do, they will use very deep language, and their purpose in behaving like a six sensory in front of other six sensories is they want to win them over. And so we think that they're that type of partner and that we can give and love unconditionally and really just overwhelm them with so much attention. And then what happens is they get spoiled. You know, they can't handle that much love and sensitivity coming from us. It's better that we save it for the clients who pay us, as sad as that sounds. Having said that, it doesn't mean you can't have a meaningful relationship with a five sensory if you just understand who they are and you give them what they need. And what they need more than unconditional love is mystery. They need to feel a bit uncertain about you sometimes and wonder what you're doing and not know everything that's going on in your life. They need you to be not an open book because that allows them to have a genuine sense of variety in their lives. And that's what they need the most. They need that feeling that they don't quite have you. And you want to do that and create that feeling in the most respectful way possible. You don't want to do it in abusive ways. You want to do it in a way where you're genuinely focused on something that's meaningful to you, and that's the number one priority in your life. If you focus on something that's important to you, you are creating the mystery naturally in a way that's not abusive, where you're hurting the other person. This is not the same thing as a trade or whoring. When you understand what another person needs, sometimes people think, oh, if you give so much, then I'm going to reciprocate so much, and that's a form of whoring or horse trading. And it's actually called respect, in my opinion, when you're a six sensory in relationship with a five sensory, because you understand them and you're giving them what they need, okay? It's not because you're trying to get something out of them. You're meeting their needs because you know who they are as a person, and you're giving them that level of empathy and respect that they can handle. You're not giving them something more than they can handle. You're not going to read the dictionary out to them. Think of the parent who's explaining sex. They wouldn't say it to a child that's 4 years old. They may say it to a child that's 14 years old. If you're a sixth sensory and you have feelings about spirit, you have belief systems about the other side and that they communicate to you, you're not going to have that conversation with the five sensory. They don't connect to that dimension. They've never experienced that before. They're just going to pretend like it's something that doesn't exist. And in the same way, they'll believe that really deep unconditional love is also a fairy tale because they haven't seen it demonstrated in front of them. Know for yourself as a sixth sensory it exists. Share with the people who can really handle it, and that may not be your partner. It may not be even your friends in your life. You may have to go to a community of other sixth sensories to really find that deep connection. That's okay. It doesn't mean you have to mess with your friendships or your relationship, you know. You can respect them for who they are and where they're at, and save that part of yourself, that really special part that connects so deeply to life with the people who understand you.